Hello, and welcome to Dreamy Tales, a sanctuary where everyone can experience calm and a touch of magic before gently drifting into sleep. Tonight, we invite you on another enchanting journey, a story that helps soothe the mind and nurture a sense of peace. Before we begin, let's take a moment to prepare our bodies and minds for a comforting, restorative rest. Make yourself cozy, and with each slow inhale and long exhale, let the cares of the day gradually slip away. It's not always easy to step back from the day's demands, especially as night falls. Yet, remember, the less we worry about how quickly we'll fall asleep, the simpler it is for our minds to release any remaining tension. Allow the gentle flow of your breathing to wash away lingering concerns, and let the story ahead guide you into a state of deep relaxation. Now, settle in, and let the dreamy atmosphere softly wrap around you. Enjoy this story, and may you drift into a peaceful, restful slumber here on Dreamy Tales. Tucked into a corner, settled by the window, Elira watched the late afternoon weather throw a coastal tantrum. Autumn, along the main shore, clipped the daylight short. A brevity deepened this day by bruised clouds scudding low, hastening an early twilight that tricked scattered street lamps along the thoroughfare into premature illumination. Inside the bakery, however, a world away from the blustering chill, the air hung thick and benevolent with the scent of coffee and baking bread, even as closing time beckoned. The space had mostly emptied, save for a few souls collecting last-minute provisions. A woman vanished through the door, clutching a box of delicate cookies, destined, perhaps, for some lamplit gathering. Periodically, the espresso machine sighed a steamy breath, contributing its heat to the room's embrace. Elira gazed through the rain-streaked pane at Main Street's storefronts, their lights beginning to gleam against the encroaching gloom. A town-wide contest seemed underway, judging by the whimsically clad straw figures propped like genial Halloween sentinels in sheltered doorways. They presided quite comfortably over the small, swirling eddies of leaves that danced in their alcoves, ephemeral cyclones snatching up October's last surrendered foliage. She was revisiting territory first charted in summer, drawn then by the lore of the Rockland Breakwater Light. A lifelong student of sea marks, Elira had spent intermittent months tracing Maine's coastline, paying homage to its historical beacons. Time had been tight on that previous journey. Obligations elsewhere had curtailed her explorations. Discovering her route would bring her nearby once more felt like a serendipitous chance to finally pilgrimage to the main Lighthouse Museum before continuing onward. The nearby Owl's Head Light also called to her, famed for possessing one of Maine's last operational Fresnel lenses, and, reputedly, a vista of breathtaking scope. The museum's website proclaimed it the nation's grandest repository of its kind, housing a formidable collection. Lenses like giant glass eyes, foghorns silenced by time, myriad artifacts of maritime vigilance. After months immersed in research, encountering these objects firsthand, absorbing their detailed histories, felt profoundly satisfying. Scale models of celebrated lighthouses she'd studied or stood before evoked a pleasing familiarity. Yet, it was always the narratives of the keepers, their resilience and familial bonds that resonated most deeply. She had lingered far longer than intended, wandering the exhibits in blissful quietude. The tourist tide had ebbed. Her timing, she reflected, had been impeccable. Emerging from the museum's warm solitude into the wind-lashed streets had been a shock. Thus, she'd sought sanctuary here, in this bakery's welcoming glow. Her lodging for the night, an inn further down the peninsula, wasn't ready for check-in. A cup of sweet, milky tea provided the perfect justification to linger in this charming local haven before venturing forth. The bell above the bakery door sang out as another late customer waved farewell to the staff, bracing themselves before slipping into the raw October air. Pulled from her thoughts, Elara knew her own departure couldn't be long delayed. She took another sip of tea, retrieving a small, worn notebook from her satchel. A quick review of Owl's Headlight's particulars seemed prudent before tomorrow's visit. She nodded, scanning the details. Commissioned in 1825, under President John Quincy Adams's authority. Positioned strategically on a peninsula thrusting into Penobscot Bay, just east of Rockland. Like many main counterparts, initially constructed of cost-effective rubble stone, a material that proved inadequate, necessitating a sturdier brick rebuild in 1852. The tower itself, a modest structure, reached only 30 feet skyward, yet perched atop its 100-foot bluff, its beam commanded the bay. The fourth-order Fresnel lens installed post-renovation, though unassuming in the grand hierarchy of lenses Elara had studied, possessed sufficient power to cast its warning light nearly 18 miles across the water. Draining the last of her tea, Elara set the notebook down. The lighthouse's history seemed straightforward enough. Primarily, it was the promised view that captivated her imagination. She recalled a passage by Samuel Adams Drake from his The Pine Tree Coast, describing Owl's Head as ushering one at once upon a scene almost too beautiful to profane with speech. When we are looking at it, impossible to find language to do it justice. Whether such hyperbole held true amidst late autumn's dun austerity remained to be seen. But she intended to discover for herself come morning. Elara folded the notebook, tucking it away. Rising somewhat reluctantly from her snug window perch, she cleared her table, shrugged into her warm coat, and wound a soft scarf around her neck. Pushing against the sturdy door, she stepped out into the brisk embrace of the evening. Now, nearly all the street lights concurred on the lateness of the hour, casting their soft, steady glow along the wet pavement. Elara walked past the neon blaze of the vintage cinema marquee, toward the spot where she'd left her car hours before. She slid gratefully into the driver's seat, the car's interior a comparative haven. Placing her bag beside her, she started the engine. As the heater began to whisper warmth through the vents and the navigation system hummed to life, she pointed the vehicle toward her refuge for this blustery night. The bed and breakfast lay only a short distance away. Driving south, the town receded, and she passed a turnoff she recognized as the route to the lighthouse itself. Tonight, however, the prospect of indoor comfort held greater appeal. Glimpses of the harbor flickered to her left, before the road curved inland, flanked by dense thickets. A weathered sign, barely decipherable in the failing light, announced her entrance into a town that grew from sea and stone. Perhaps 10 minutes later, she arrived amidst a small constellation of houses and businesses clustered around a sheltered cove. The navigation proved essential. House numbers were elusive in the near-total darkness. Nevertheless, she located the correct driveway on her first attempt, pulling into an empty parking space. She might, she mused, be the sole guest. Opening the car door into a rising gust, Elara retrieved her luggage from the trunk. Bowing her head against the wind, she hurried onto the covered porch and pushed open the heavy front door. Hauling her bags inside, she pulled the door shut, instantly silencing the autumn chill. She paused in the entryway, catching her breath. The house felt old, perhaps once a farmhouse, she speculated. Not grand, but undeniably cozy. Her gaze fell to the rustic, wide-flanked floorboards beneath her boots, then drifted through a nearby doorway into a living room, where flames danced merrily in a stone hearth. A small desk stood before her, equipped with a call bell. Before she could reach for it, quick footsteps approached from the rear of the house. A woman emerged, clad comfortably in jeans and an apron, looking as though she'd just stepped away from kitchen duties. A broad smile lit her face as she introduced herself as Martha, welcoming Elara with a polite apology for her casual attire. Elara waved it off, assuring her she hadn't expected formality, and they shared a brief laugh. The feeling persisted. This was decidedly the off-season, lending a pleasingly informal air to the inn. Martha led Elara upstairs, showing her to a room. "You're our only guest tonight," she explained, "so I gave you the big room with the pretty view." Elara expressed her thanks, anticipating the morning light revealing the promised vista. Her host then extended an invitation for a light supper downstairs once she was settled. "With no one else expected," Martha added, "I thought you might enjoy eating by the fireside. Does that sound appealing?" It sounded utterly marvelous, and Elara said so. With that, Martha withdrew, closing the door softly behind her. Elara surveyed her accommodation. Generous windows hinted at the view, currently veiled by darkness. Drawing the curtains against the night, she took in the welcoming space. A queen-size bed dominated the center, adorned with a colorful patchwork quilt atop crisp white sheets. Hardwood floors, mirroring those downstairs, added warmth, softened by an oval braided rug. An antique chest of drawers stood nearby, a charming old lamp upon it, casting a golden circle of light. The walls wore wallpaper sprigged with a dainty floral pattern. The room felt both spacious and snug, a perfect sanctuary. She looked forward to reading in bed after supper. Smoothing her wind-tousled hair in the mirror, Elara unpacked a few essentials before deciding to head downstairs. Hunger wasn't pressing, but the lure of the fire was strong. Book in hand, she left her temporary haven, descending the slightly creaking stairs back to the living room. Plush armchairs and a small sofa were gathered companionably around the fireplace. Elara chose one, sinking gratefully into its depths, her eyes drawn to the hypnotic flicker of the flames. The room was furnished with quiet taste. Bookcases lined the walls. Intimate seating arrangements suggested quiet conversation. A bay window presumably overlooked the street, though now it reflected only the firelit room against the profound darkness outside. Streetlights were sparse in this small riverside hamlet. After a few moments of quiet contemplation, Martha reappeared, offering a couple of dinner options. Alara readily accepted the offer of seafood chowder and a green salad. Promising to return shortly with a tray, Martha vanished once more. Alara leaned back into the armchair's embrace, closing her eyes. The room's only sounds were the steady tick-tock of a nearby grandfather clock and the companionable crackle from the hearth. Faintly, she could hear Martha moving about in the kitchen, the clink of dishes and opening of drawers drifting from the back of the house. It was fortunate Martha returned promptly with dinner, as Alara, steeped in warmth and quiet, felt herself drifting toward sleep. A moment later, a standing tray held a steaming bowl of soup, oyster crackers, and a delicate salad before her. While waiting for the chowder to cool slightly, Alara inquired if Martha would be joining her. Martha replied she'd eaten earlier, but settled into a chair opposite Alara, asking about her plans for the morning. Breakfast, after all, was included. In discussing the details, Alara mentioned her lighthouse objective and her hope for clear skies. Martha nodded, affirming the worthiness of the trip. Of course, this time of year, you'll only see the exterior, Martha cautioned. No tours running tomorrow. She paused, a twinkle entering her eyes. But the legends, they're the best part. Alara paused, spoon hovering mid-air, an eyebrow arched. Legends, she echoed. Such as? Martha leaned forward conspiratorially. You mean to tell me you've come all this way without hearing about the ghosts? In all her meticulous research into lighthouse histories, keepers, and mechanisms, Alara hadn't encountered any mention of hauntings. Intrigued, she broke open her packet of crackers and invited Martha to elaborate. Settling back, Martha nodded, clearly pleased by the invitation. With the fire painting shifting patterns of light and shadow around them, and the wind keening at the windows, she began. The thing is, Martha started, both spirits said to haunt the lighthouse are quite helpful. Anyone who understands the keeper's devotion knows they took their duties with utmost seriousness. Nothing deterred them, not even the greatest obstacles. For some, it seems, the dedication extends beyond life itself. 2 benevolent entities are said to still watch over Owl's head light. The first is a former keeper, though his exact identity remains a mystery. Alara realized she was holding a spoonful of chowder, suspended, captivated. She finished the bite, momentarily distracted by the soup's exquisite flavor. Swallowing the rich, creamy broth, she scooped another spoonful and waited. With practiced timing, her host continued. Tales abound of footprints discovered in fresh snow leading to the lighthouse, the distinct impression of workmen's boots. Now, you might think, so what? Anyone could walk there. But here's the peculiarity. The tracks only ever lead to the tower, never away. Martha spread her hands for dramatic effect, and upon following these one-way tracks, astonished keepers have found the brass gleaming and the lens immaculately polished. Elara recalled all she'd learned about the sacrosanct nature of daily lighthouse maintenance. Such spectral assistance would indeed signify a spirit of profound helpfulness. But Martha hadn't finished with the ghostly keeper. In the 1980s, she went on, a family lived at the light, including their 2-year-old daughter Claire. Her father apparently found her out of bed one night, and she told him quite earnestly, "Fog's rolling in. Time to put the foghorn on." Now, anyone familiar with toddlers knows they parrot odd phrases, but her parents swore they'd never uttered such words around her. It came entirely out of the blue. Martha held up a finger. Furthermore, for years, young Claire nonchalantly mentioned the presence of a bearded man in a blue coat and seaman's cap around the keeper's house. Elara realized she'd finished her chowder without noticing, sheepishly placing her spoon beside the empty cracker wrapper. The spectral keeper was compelling enough, but now she wondered about the second spirit. Martha didn't keep her waiting. Of course, running a light station often required the whole family's effort. Wives, even children, played their part. Elara nodded. Her research had certainly confirmed this. Martha resumed her narrative. There's a gentle presence many call the Little Lady, who seems dedicated to keeping house at Owl's Head. Apparently, she enjoys rattling the silverware in the kitchen drawers at the keeper's dwelling. She's also been credited with doors opening and closing inexplicably. Martha shrugged, conveying a storyteller's neutrality. A keeper in the late 80s reported his wife seeing a woman in a white dress gazing out the windows, and their son insisted a lady often sat quietly in a chair in his room. Folks say she radiates a peaceful feeling. Her presence isn't unwelcome. Elara mulled over the two accounts, and naturally, after the light was automated in the late 80s, there's been no resident keeper to report whether the ghosts remain, she ventured. Martha nodded again, approvingly. Precisely. For all we know, those spirits are the only ones maintaining a constant vigil to this day. Having now finished her crisp green salad, Elara leaned back in the soft armchair, folding her napkin on the tray. Martha paused, asking if she might fancy some hot cider. Elara agreed readily, and her host carried the tray toward the kitchen to fetch their drinks. Sinking a little deeper into her seat, Elara watched the mesmerizing dance of the flames, a warm languor beginning to steal over her limbs. Martha returned, bearing 2 steaming mugs, releasing a delicious, spicy apple aroma into the room. She placed the cups on a side table between them and resumed her seat. Of course, she began anew, my absolute favorite story about Owl's Head Light isn't ghostly at all. It involves a truly heroic dog named Spot. At this, Ilara's eyes widened. She lifted her mug of cider, blowing gently across the surface to cool it. Pausing to inhale the comforting scent, she closed her eyes appreciatively before asking Martha to tell her about Spot. Her host obliged agreeably. Back in the 1930s and 40s, the keeper lived there with his family, including 2 daughters, Millie and Pauline. They apparently taught their Springer Spaniel, Spot, to ring the fog bell by tugging its rope whenever a boat passed. It became a ritual. Passing vessels would often answer with their own bell or horn. Spot particularly favored the mail boat from Matinicus Island. The mailman, Stuart Ames, was known to bring him treats. The dog learned to recognize the unique chug of that specific engine. Well, one fierce winter night, a blizzard buried the fog bell mechanism under deep snowdrifts. Meanwhile, out on the water, the mailman desperately needed that bell's guidance to avoid the treacherous rocks at the cliff base. Hearing the mailboat's engine through the storm, Spot scratched frantically at the door to be let out. He raced down to the shore and commenced barking furiously into the blizzard. The mailman heard him, whistled back, and managed to steer clear of disaster. Spot became a local hero. He's not a ghost, but you'll find him immortalized up there. There's a plaque in his memory. Such a very good boy. Martha smiled at the image of the plucky spaniel, taking a sip of her cider. Ilara smiled too, savoring the last warmth of her own drink before setting the mug down. Leaning her head back against the chair, she gazed reflectively at the fireplace. "I'm so glad I heard these stories before visiting," she said to Martha. "And to think, all I was truly anticipating was the view." Martha chuckled. "You'll likely have the place entirely to yourself this time of year," she said. "You can visit Spot's Memorial in peace. And the forecast looks fine for tomorrow." Both women glanced toward the rattling window panes, sitting in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the old house settle and creak around them. Sensing the perfect moment to withdraw, Martha rose and collected their empty mugs. She mentioned that warm muffins and fruit would be available in the kitchen any time after 7 the next morning. With a kind nod and a quiet "good night," she disappeared toward the back of the house once more. The fire's embrace was so potent, the armchair so yielding, that Ilara felt reluctant to ascend the stairs. Yet, the promise of her comfortable bed beckoned. Eventually, she roused herself from the sitting room's warmth and made her way quietly up the staircase. The hour wasn't excessively late, but the profound darkness and the wild weather outside conspired to make bedtime seem exceptionally appealing. After changing into pajamas and brushing her teeth, Ilara gratefully pulled back the cheerful quilt and sank into the crisp white sheets. The bed was immensely comfortable. She tucked the covers snugly under her arms, stretched out luxuriously and exhaled with contentment. She attempted to read her book, but the words soon swam before her tired eyes. Within minutes, the effort was abandoned. Switching off the lamp, she drifted easily into sleep, lulled by the gentle percussion of tree branches tapping against the window pane. That night, Elara dreamt of her impending visit to the little white sentinel of Owl's Head. In sleep's soft realm, she awoke to a luminous autumn morning. Her dream window revealed a river glittering like scattered diamonds, flowing toward the vast expanse of the Gulf of Maine, just beyond the village rooftops. Sunlight performed a merry ballet upon water bluer than any she had ever witnessed. In this vivid imagining, she descended to a sun-drenched farmhouse kitchen, where a basket overflowed with warm, crumb-topped muffins, accompanied by a steaming mug of coffee. She savored each bite, the burst of blueberries mingling with the crunchy pearl sugar crust. Coffee steam rose through the sunbeams, slanting across the kitchen table, fortifying her against the imagined crispness of the air outside. Then, with the peculiar logic of dreams, she was suddenly seated in her car, luggage stowed neatly behind her, driving north along the road toward Owl's Head State Park. Forests dense with evergreens, and the skeletal remains of deciduous trees, clinging to their last russet leaves, slipped past. The sun, finding new pathways through the increasingly bare branches, reached eagerly down, staking its winter claim. As she drew closer, the harbor waters sparkled to her left, small working boats already chugging purposefully away from the town docks. And then she had arrived. She parked in a lot utterly devoid of other visitors. Stepping out into the crystalline October air, Elara followed a wide gravel path. To one side, the ground fell away sharply, confirming her position high on a promontory. Through the trees to her right, glimpses of the bay shimmered, promising the imminent reveal of sweeping vistas. The lighthouse materialized before her. A neat keeper's cottage stood sentinel to her left, while the bright white brick cylinder of Owl's Headlight itself crowned a steep embankment. A set of stairs zigzagged sharply upward, an abrupt ascent toward the tower like a pathway to the heavens. She climbed slowly, deliberately. Reaching the summit, she turned, a sigh of pure contentment escaping her lips. The panorama unfurled before her was every bit as magnificent as promised. The grassy hillside, faded to autumn's palette of gold and rust, sloped down to the craggy headland thrusting defiantly into the water. Beyond lay a churning expanse of aqua and deepest blue, stretching from horizon to horizon. In the distance, veiled by dissipating morning mist, lay indistinct shapes of land, peninsulas or islands. Elara couldn't be sure. What she knew, with unshakable certainty, standing there in that breathtaking sunlit moment, bathed in the bracing, salty breeze, was that she was becoming part of Owl's Head's enduring story. Drifting effortlessly through the dreamscape, she stood suspended in time, perhaps for a minute, perhaps an hour. Eventually, her dream self found its way to a simple stone marker bearing the inscription, "Spot the Lighthouse Dog." Reading these plain words, etched forever onto this isolated hillside above the restless sea, Elara smiled, a profound sense of comfort settling over her just before she woke, certain that this unassuming beacon would forever remain under the watchful care of faithful guardians. Sunlight, tentative yet bright, dappled the lane unwinding before you, a silent country passage deep in England's northern lakes. Spring breathed here, a crisp stillness carried on the April morning air. Along the verge, sycamore trees tentatively unfurled their first green, though remnants of winter, a drift of fallen leaves, clung to the grassy edge. A quick glance confirmed your solitude. A deliberate scuff of your boots sent the brittle carpet spinning skyward. Russet, amber, scorched orange, deep nut brown. They pirouetted against the piercing blue before settling, crackling underfoot as you passed. A small, satisfying sound that drew a private smile. A weathered sign announced your arrival. Lowswater Village. Your breath plumed white in the chill, yet the sun laid a warm hand against your cheek. Tucking your chin deeper into the collar of your thick coat, you rounded a corner to the right. A hand reached out, tracing the contours of a dry stone wall. Its light, gray granite, pocked with white lichen stars and swathed in deep green, earth-fragrant moss, offered a rough, ancient texture to your fingertips. The turn revealed a sudden expanse. Broad fields unfurled, dotted with sheep drifting through long, dew-silvered grass. Beyond them, 3 hills stood sentinel. As you walked, the ascending sun painted their slopes, unveiling stony fissures, scattered bushes, and the shadowed valley mouth they guarded. Even at this distance, the iron-gray stillness of Crummock water was visible, a silent mirror to the sky. But those hills were not your destination. Today held a different promise. Hopping a rustic wooden stile, you saw it, nestled in a small field fringed by alder and ash. A hot air balloon waited, tethered yet expectant. No one else stirred. Its rainbow-striped canopy swelled and subsided like a gentle breath. Crossing the field towards it, the warmth radiating from the burners intensified with each step. As you neared, an inquisitive squirrel, lured by the stillness, edged closer. Just as your hand touched the wicker weave of the basket, the burners pulsed twice, quick, bright flares, an eager welcome. The squirrel, startled, vanished back into the hedgerow. Clearly, aerial voyages weren't universally appealing. With as much grace as you could muster, you hoisted yourself aboard. The basket's interior was Spartan, a blanket, a cushion, and tucked in one corner, a small wooden box. Walnut, perhaps, or rosewood. Simple, yet exquisitely crafted, it bore the patina of age. The lid's edge, worn smooth and pale from countless touches, contrasted with the darker grain. Running your fingers over its knotted surface confirmed a smoothness born not of polish, but of long use. A soft squeak accompanied the opening lid. Inside lay a folded paper. As you lifted it, it unfurled, releasing a rich, woody scent of aged parchment. A map of the Lake District. A tiny crimson dot marked your present location, precisely between the twin waters of Lowswater and Crummock. As you moved to refold the map, a second slip of paper fluttered out, twisting towards the basket floor. You stooped, catching it deftly between 2 fingers. Unfolding it revealed handwritten script. No signature, no sender. Just 5 stark words. I know where to go. With another whoosh of flame, the basket gave a slight buoyant lift. This vessel, it seemed, possessed its own intent. You pocketed the map. Another surge of heat, and you were rising, smoothly, almost imperceptibly. Higher now, the crowns of the tallest ash trees slipped beneath you. Looking down, the sheep had shrunk to miniatures, smaller than your smallest fingernail. Ascending further, the balloon escaped the valley's lingering shadow. The morning sun flooded in, filling you with a sense of light and profound contentment. Weightlessness claimed you. Silence enveloped everything, profound and pure. The air tasted clean, sharp, elemental. As you climbed, the lakeland panorama unfurled around you, vast and intricate. Now level with the hilltops, most of the district lay revealed below. You drew out the map once more. Far to the south, a faint metallic glint, the ironwork of Blackpool Tower, a Victorian echo of Eiffel, opened in 1894. Shielding your eyes against the climbing sun, you could just discern the distant shimmer of the ocean beyond the Cumbrian coast. A subtle salt tang carried on the cool air confirmed it. Birds wheeled nearby, effortless masters of the currents. The surrounding hills and fells glowed gold and green in the early light. Millennia etched into their slopes, intricate gullies, rocky seams, hidden streams, secret dells, all carved by water, wind, and the slow chisel of time. Ice ages, stretching back 2 million years, had draped this land in glaciers, their immense weight grinding out the U-shaped valleys, the deep lakes at their hearts, and the smaller tarns glittering near the peaks. Leaning against the basket's rim, you drew a deep breath. Gratitude washed over you, a quiet tide acknowledging the sheer majesty of the scene. Closing your eyes, you let the sunlight warm your face, your neck. A wave of calm flowed downwards, from head to shoulders, along your arms to your fingertips, down your torso, through your hips and legs, reaching the very tips of your toes. Opening your eyes, you glanced over the edge. You were drifting over a hill distinguished by twin peaks. Recognition sparked. Hen Combe. You must be heading south. Indeed, down the valley, the surface of Buttermere gleamed. A quick check of the map confirmed it. The little red dot had migrated southwards, tracing your aerial path. You folded the map, waited a breath, then looked again. The dot had edged closer still to Buttermere. Smiling, you tucked the magical chart away. Gliding along the valley, leaving Ennerdale Water behind, your gaze fell upon the tiny sheep grazing far below. Suddenly, a pair of large raptors sliced through the air beneath the basket. You watched, captivated, as they spiraled, then beat their wings with deep, deliberate strokes. Dark gray backs, rounded tails, one noticeably larger than its companion. As they banked, their speckled white and gray undersides flashed. Beautiful bands of dark gray and white striped the length of their underwings. Long yellow legs tucked beneath them. Their fierce amber eyes glinted as they swept past again. Goshawks, a rare privilege. Once, near extinction here, they remained elusive. typically haunting woodlands, nesting low amongst the trees. Those incredible crimson-tinged eyes, perfectly adapted for navigating dense forest. The pair swooped in unison, wings beating with deceptive laziness, then turned, dissolving into the brilliance of the rising sun. The blue overhead had acquired a subtle haze. You were high now, thin clouds still distant veils far above. A delicate, luminous halo encircled the sun, a sign of cirrostratus clouds, formed of minute ice crystals suspended thousands of feet aloft. Sunlight, striking these crystals, fractured and reflected, creating the ethereal effect. To the east, over the sea, the clouds massed thicker, darker, hinting at a brewing storm. Here, westerly winds journeyed across the Atlantic, gathering moisture, before colliding with the Cumbrian peaks. Forced upwards, the moisture cooled, condensed, and fell as rain. The lifeblood of this intensely green and fertile landscape. The balloon had carried you towards a new cluster of peaks. One summit, however, asserted its dominance, rising slightly above its neighbors. You realized you were ascending to meet it, Scafell Pike, England's highest point. Consulting your map, you noted its height, 978 meters. Tranquil today, but born of volcanic fury hundreds of millions of years ago. Part of a vast island arc akin to those in the Pacific. Glaciers, some 20,000 years past, had sculpted its formidable ridges and gouges, now clearly visible as you drifted near its very apex. A dozen or so figures clad in sturdy boots, waterproofs, and helmets moved with care towards the circular stone cairn marking the summit. Tiny figures from this height. One looked up, spotted the drifting balloon, and began to wave. Gradually, companions noticed, joining in one by one. Grinning, you waved back until the peak slid behind you, and you began a gentle descent on its far side. As Scafell Pike receded, something unexpected snagged your attention. On an outcrop below, a shape resolved itself. A large square with distinctly rounded corners. Peering intently, you discerned three more foundational shapes nearby. What could they be? As if sensing your query, the balloon dipped lower. Now you could see them clearly. Low walls, the spectral footprints of buildings erected centuries ago. You were gazing upon Hardknot Roman Fort. For nearly 2 millennia, it had stood sentinel on this isolated hilltop, guarding the pass. In the early 2nd century CE, under Emperor Hadrian, soldiers built this 3-acre bastion, one of Britain's remotest outposts. The 4th cohort of Dalmatians, infantry hailing from modern-day Croatia and the Balkans, constructed it. Those outlines marked the garrison headquarters, the commander's dwelling, the granary. The 500 soldiers stationed here likely lived in leather tents, parading on the flattened square of earth you saw. Men from across a vast empire, countless miles from home, striving to carve a life in this corner of northern England. Drifting down the Eskdale Valley, you imagined them looking up, just as you were now, at the crags and summits surrounding Hardknot, perhaps sharing your sense of awe at the rugged beauty. With a gentle, decisive shift, the balloon altered course. You consulted the map. The red dot now tracked towards a peak labeled Old Man of Coniston, a curious name. As you looked from the landscape back to the map, new text faded into view beneath the name. a likely fusion, it explained, of ancient tongues, the Celtic Alt-Mayan, high stone, and the Norse Konungstun, king's farm, for the nearby town. Yet, local lore insisted that from Coniston Village, one of the hill's ridges perfectly resembled the profile of a reclining man. Passing the old man, the scars of human industry became apparent, remnants of slate quarries and copper mines. Iron tracks for carts snaked across the slopes. Skeletal remains of cable cars once used for hauling rock stood silent, and tumble-down shacks offered ghostly shelter, where workers once huddled from Cumbrian downpours with flasks of hot tea. Today, profound quiet reigned. Soon you cleared the hill. Ahead stretched a long, slender ribbon of water, Coniston Water, one of the largest lakes in the district. You were approaching its western shore. Across the water, perhaps half a mile distant, a large, white, three-storied house sprawled across the hillside, embraced by gardens and woodland. Your map identified it, Brantwood, home to the Victorian luminary John Ruskin. In the latter half of the 19th century, he rose as one of Britain's most celebrated thinkers, writing on subjects from mythology and archaeology to politics and literature. The map, it seemed, had more to share. Beside the outline of Brantwood, words slowly materialized. Ruskin's own. When we build, let us think that we build forever. Let it not be for present delight, nor for present use alone. Let it be such work as our descendants will thank us for. And let us think, as we lay stone on stone, that a time will come when those stones will be held sacred, because our hands have touched them, and men will say as they look upon the labor and wrought substance of them, "See, this our fathers did for us." Gazing across the lake, at the enduring hills, the ancient valleys, the patchwork fields, you pondered the landscape's persistence through millennia, altered only by the slow breath of wind and time. You had witnessed views unchanged since Roman eyes beheld them. Centuries hence, others would see what you saw today. It felt profound. Sometimes life seemed to rush by, time whistling past like the wind. Yet, unknowingly, each day you laid a stone, then another, adding yours to those laid by loved ones, by strangers passed on the street. A beautiful, comforting image formed in your mind. You closed your eyes again, feeling the sun's warmth penetrate your eyelids. The air hung motionless. A long, slow, deep inhalation, held for a moment, then released. A quiet certainty settled. Everything was all right. The balloon, as if sensing your readiness for solid ground, began its descent. Smoothly, gradually, it carried you down, down, down. The church spire, the pubs, the gray slate roofs of Coniston Village grew steadily larger. Downwards you drifted, feeling the pull of gravity reassert itself. With a soft thud, you landed on the shingle beach at the water's edge. As the basket settled, you hopped over the side and walked towards the line of trees bordering the beach. The balloon, apparently, had further destinations. It was already lifting, slowly detaching from the earth again. Turning back, you saw the burner flare twice. A warm, silent farewell. You watched it ascend, drift across the lake, pass over Brantwood, rising higher and away. A final pulse of flame, and it dwindled, eventually vanishing from sight. A quiet hope lingered. Perhaps you would meet again someday. The sun, fully risen now, warmed the beach. Your day had begun in the pre-dawn chill. Now, rest beckoned. Finding a comfortable spot in the shade of the silver birch trees, you leaned back against a smooth trunk and closed your eyes. Distantly, church bells chimed, their notes echoing across the hillsides and silent fields. Water lapped softly against the shingle. The gentle bleating of sheep and their lambs drifted on the air. You breathed deeply, evenly. You recalled the clouds seen earlier, high and distant. Like them, you allowed stray thoughts to enter your mind, acknowledged them, and let them drift away. Gradually, peacefully, you surrendered to a deep and contented sleep.